everyone. My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are doing something I don't oftentimes do, and we're going to be focusing on dominance and tops. And I want to do this more in 2023 because even though my content is fairly neutral and adaptable, and I try to make it so regardless of your orientation or what side of the slash you're on, you can take what I say and make it work for you, I have really realized there is a huge chasm between what is available for new dominants and tops and what is available for subs and bottoms. Because let me tell you, as a submissive, we are spoiled for choice here. We have books, we have blogs, we have FetLife, we have discussion groups, we have Discord chats, we have Facebook, we have old Tumblrs, we have YouTube videos, we have podcasts, we have so many options for learning about why it is we do what we do, working through certain problems, getting emotional in a safe space. And that just does not exist for doms and tops. And I want there to be, because oh my god, especially on this website, when you look up dominance, there is a lot of alpha male stuff, let's say, and a lot of misogyny, and I obviously don't agree with that. So I want to help start to bridge that gap in information by going over some more basic common problems that doms and tops run into, especially early on in their journey, because I don't see enough people talking about this. So let's go ahead and get into it. The first, number one, most common thing I see people struggling with is developing confidence and feeling nervous before a scene. And despite what some people will tell you, dominants are not all born knowing that's what they are. They are not born holding a golden flogger and knowing how to use it. It is a skill set that you need to develop, even though it can be something that's really appealing and you enjoy it and you love being obeyed or feeling like, oh my gosh, it would be so amazing if I could just spank someone. You can have all those feelings and then not really know how to execute on it. I think that's where a lot of people run into issues, is they're like, oh my god, somebody wants to call me this thing. I want to be somebody's dominant, but I don't know what the heck I'm doing yet, and what if they find out, and what if I actually don't really know what I'm doing and I hurt someone? And it's like sort of imposter syndrome in some cases, but also kind of justified at the same time. And I want to start out here by just saying, it is okay to feel nervous. It is okay to not have confidence yet. If you went in as a new top and went, oh yeah, I totally know how to use this thing, and then you just start whipping people at a dungeon the first time you ever held a whip, that would be a huge red flag. And I think in the long term, even though you start out being kind of nervous and less confident, you find it harder to find people to play with maybe, I think overall, after you've been doing this, I think having that start where you do have some nerves is a benefit to you, because when you start out being overconfident and aggressive and arrogant, you never want to learn, and you can't really get better if you don't want to learn. So take comfort in knowing that if you are nervous right now, you are starting from a good place, and it's actually going to help you as you go through your journey. But I really think what helps people with their confidence is to not bite off more than they can chew. I think it's really tempting when you first get into BDSM to be like, oh yeah, I want to do this, this, and this, and create these like really elaborate, super involved scenes that like replicate your every fantasy perfectly. Don't do that. Work your way up over time. Go slowly, do one or two things, really practice, really read about what you're doing before you do it. There are a lot of books and online courses you can take where you can learn about like flogging technique or how to spank somebody or how to do wax play. You can practice and learn how to do those things on your own. You can practice using a dummy. You can practice on yourself. You can practice on a pillow. Whatever is accessible to you, practice on it. Don't necessarily practice on a live human being besides yourself yet, but practice on something. Feel how the implement is in your hand. Feel how it is to be using it. And if it resonates with you, and maybe where you feel, okay, this doesn't really feel comfortable to me, or wow, that was totally different than I expected. Work through all those kinks, pun intended, beforehand. And then when you get to actually doing a scene, you know what you're doing. You know, okay, if I drop from this height when I'm doing wax play, it's gonna feel less intense than like down here. Or I know if I'm using this paddle in this way, it's gonna kind of feel like this. It's not going to be perfect, but knowing that you have really studied before you start playing with other people can really help your confidence. Also, something I think a lot of people miss out on is talking to other doms and tops. And this isn't always easy because depending on where you live, there might not be anyone else. They might be very closed off and secretive with their closely held dominant secrets of the trade they don't want to share with anyone else. And that can happen. I think it's more changing in recent years, but that can be a thing. But even just going to a dungeon and watching what other people do can help so much, because then you can go, oh, I see. When this happens, he does this, or when this happens, she does this. And I think that can be a really good way of knowing, okay, this is what an actual BDSM scene looks like. This is how you have that dominant air. This is how you walk the walk. This is how you talk and communicate. And even just kind of taking those notes in your head when you're watching a scene can be so helpful. But if you have any opportunity to talk directly to other doms and tops and get advice from them, that is such a good thing. Even hearing from them, oh yeah, I was so nervous at first, or yeah, it took me like a year to build my confidence up. That is perfectly normal. And I think hearing that from other doms and tops that are maybe like 20 years in can be an amazing thing and so reassuring. And I think the second most common problem that I see people run into really closely goes together with the first, which is people not knowing what to do during a scene. Because you might have a scenario where, okay, I know I want to be a dom, I know I want to be a top, my girlfriend or boyfriend wants to do BDSM with me, what do I do now? And that totally makes sense, because when you look at media representations of BDSM, it wildly oscillates between like extremely tame, like 50 Shades of Grey, running an ice cube down somebody's nipple type stuff, all the way over to just like plain extreme, and like trussing somebody up like it's the Sleeping Beauty trilogy, right? And like those are not really accurate representations of how people do BDSM, how extreme it can get, or what actual scenes look like. And the easy answer here to know what to do if you already have a partner, or even just somebody you want to do pickup play with, is to ask them. I know, wild. Communication solves a lot of problems, actually, as it turns out. And I know as a dom or a top, you might be thinking, well, if I have to ask, they're not going to think I'm that dominant anymore. If I have to ask, they're going to think I don't know what I'm doing. And if you run into somebody that treats you that way, that is going, well, I mean, I thought you were a real dom, but you had to ask me first, so like you can't actually be that dominant. Run away. That is not a bottom or sub you want to be playing with, in my opinion. I think somebody should want to have a collaborative experience with their partner creating scenes. They should be completely open to sharing with you, yeah, I'm into this, or I've tried this. Especially if you have a partner that has done BDSM before, that can be intimidating as a new person, but it can also be a huge source of information. What did they like before? What didn't they like? What fantasies did they have that they want to try now? What fantasies do you have? Talk about that. Come up with maybe 2, 3, 4 things in the most that sound interesting to both of you want to try together, and figure out how to start doing that. Now, I would say at first you're not really going to be doing like full-on scenes. They're going to be more like practice runs, because you kind of need to do that to know how to have a whole scene. Like if you've never driven a car before, you can read manuals, you can watch videos, but you're not actually going to know how to drive until you start driving. And most people are not driving on the highway at 80 miles an hour the first time they ever get in a car. And so I think you need to treat doing BDSM in a similar fashion. Go slowly, build up your skills in particular areas, and then combine them together. So let's say you talk to your partner and they're really into the idea of wearing a hood, or they want to wear a gag, and they're also really into spanking. Don't do all of those all at once, but talk to them about doing just spanking by itself maybe. And then you can see how that feels, and do kind of a mini scene where you maybe go for 2 minutes or for 20 hits and really communicate during that act. And then later on, if it feels good for you later, you can do another spanking scene where you add in the gag, or you add in the hood, or you add in other elements you decide you want to do later. And especially when it comes to your first scene, do not build it up to be this like world-changing, amazing, oh my god, super important, I'm losing my BDSM virginity kind of a thing. just realize everything is going to take practice, and these first few scenes are serving you to help you be better when you can get into those more deep topics. And really make sure your partner understands, hey, if we're going to start playing together, we're just going to kind of test things out, we're going to see how they feel, and let them know they're not going to be having the like mind-blowing subspace experience they're probably expecting. It could still happen, but make sure they know they're not going to have like 2 hours of subby bliss before you start your first ever spanking scene. And then I think if you're still struggling with ideas for what to do and you're like, okay, well, we're both new, neither one of us know what we want, this is where something called a yes, no, maybe checklist can be super, super important, because that can give you literally hundreds of ideas where you can sit down and do it together, do it separately, and talk about it afterwards and go through, hey, blindfolds sound cool. Hey, what is it like to be bound up with chain? I don't know. And that can spark conversations, that can spark ideas. And if you want to know more about how to use a yes, no, maybe checklist, I have an old video about it I'm planning to redo soon in the description box below, and there are tons of options online. Now, I think speaking of the Sleeping Beauty trilogy, what do you do when you have a submissive, new or experienced, that wants to do more extreme kinks? Like they want to do they want to do the whole Sleeping Beauty trilogy. Oh, I want to be trussed up in the air for 3 straight days and I want to have carrots shoved up my butt. Like, what do you do if that's what they bring to the table? Well, I think this is really interesting because a lot of people are not prepared to deal with this, because I think the common narrative is that dominants and tops are these horrible, sadistic, mean, like monstrous people that would do literally anything to a submissive if a submissive did not have boundaries and limits in place. And otherwise, they would do literally anything. And that is not true. Let me tell you right now, dominants and tops, y'all can have limits too. Y'all can have boundaries. You should have limits and boundaries. So before you start kind of figuring out, okay, how can I do this kink my partner has? Ask yourself, is this a limit for you? Let's say your partner is into water sports, and at first you're like, oh, well, that seems kind of squeaky and strange. I don't know if I'm really into that. I don't know if I want to do that. Is that just something you have kind of a uncomfortable feeling about, but when you sit and think about it logically, you can see how you would be comfortable trying that? Or is that like a hard no, absolutely not, never, ever, ever? And it's okay if it's something where I never want to do this. You are not less of a dom or top just because you have things you don't want to do. And it can also be true that maybe you wouldn't want to do the actual real version of that thing, like your partner wants to be kidnapped or something, or they want to do knife play. And maybe you would think about that and go, well, maybe I wouldn't be comfortable with a real knife, but I would be comfortable with a fake knife or a prop knife. Try to figure out those areas where there could be overlap, but only if you are actually comfortable with it. Do not overextend yourself to make your partner happy, and that goes for both sides of the slash here. So if you ultimately decide you want to try doing these more edgier kinks and you're not really sure how to do that yet, start thinking about where the roadblocks are. And I am planning to do a whole video in detail of how to do and navigate more extreme kinks, but for the sake of this right now for newbies, evaluate what is it that would be keeping you from doing this thing. Is it a skill set problem where you've never done water sports before and you have no idea where to begin? Or maybe your partner's really into heavy impact play and it's more of an endurance problem where you maybe even wish you could go harder, but you always get tired out before they're actually ready to end the scene. Or maybe it's a guilt and shame thing. It's more of a mental issue where you want to be able to go in that direction, but you feel, or you think you would feel, so guilty and so ashamed afterwards that you can't even contemplate how to get over that. And that is a very valid and common issue. So let's get into how you would work through that. I think if it's more of a skill set issue, go back to answer for number 1, right? Learn. Observe other people, ask questions on FetLife, look for information in groups on FetLife, and if you have any ability at all, take a class. I know sometimes finding a class can be very difficult, but if you can find one, absolutely take it. that is the best way to start working through a skill set gap. If you have a partner that is okay kind of being a test dummy, you can also practice with them, but I would start out trying to learn on your own before just treating your partner like a guinea pig off the bat. Now, if it's more of an endurance problem, try to figure out how you can make scenes that work for you. Maybe you start out by trying to tire them out first, right? Like have them do a bunch of yard work or clean your whole house or run on a treadmill first. And I'm saying this as somebody is more like a service subtype. If they're not into service submission, that might not necessarily be something that they're into. Like, why would I run on a treadmill or do a workout right before a scene? But you can also time your scenes where maybe if they go to the gym on Wednesdays at 5 p.m., maybe you plan a scene for 6 when they are going to be still somewhat tired from that workout. You can also focus on doing things that are very low effort but also high reward. I think for me, the number one example of this would be something like caning. Spanking and flogging can be really intense, especially on your wrists and also for your shoulders when it comes to flogging. But with caning, I think even with just like a really light tap with the cane, you can get a huge output in terms of how much sensation your partner is getting without having to do that much effort. Now, caning can be very intense if you're doing it in a certain style, but I think it has a really good reward to effort ratio, if I had to put it in that way. Now, if the problem you are dealing with is guilt and shame, let's go ahead and talk about that, because I do think that feeling guilt and shame is a huge issue for tops and doms. And that's not surprising. We live in a society, we are in a culture where from the time we are very little, we are all taught hitting people is bad, hitting someone is wrong, hurting somebody makes you a bad person. People who hurt other people are bad. And that sticks with us. That does not get left behind in the kindergarten classroom. And some people do not hold on to that kind of messaging that hard, and they are able to let go of it fairly easily. However, for a lot of us, we really hold that as a value because, oh my gosh, I don't want to be that asshole partner. I don't want to be like that person on TV. I don't want to be labeled as a domestic abuser. And so it can be a lot of work to process actually what I am doing is okay. And so I think the first thing to keep in mind here for combating guilt and shame is to realize that what you are doing is consensual and that the intention behind these messages of like hurting people is wrong involves a violation of bodily autonomy and consent. And that when you are doing something with full enthusiastic and affirmative consent, that is totally different from just like wailing on somebody like a high school bully. You are doing this because you both want to be there. You both enjoy what's happening. You're both getting something out of this, which is entirely different from one-sided violence. And I think this is where help from your partner can be a really good thing. And you can say, hey, when we're negotiating, I would really like it if you could be super clear about what it is that you're into and that you really do want to do this. You can check in during a scene and say, yeah, you like that, don't you? Or, yeah, you're totally into this, I can tell. Or, you deserve this, don't you? You can ask very like affirmative questions like, this feels good, doesn't it? And that can be a really good way of getting affirmation in the moment. My partner likes this. My partner wants to be here. They enjoy it when I do this to them. And then also after scenes, right? Doms and tops, you are also allowed to have aftercare. You can ask for your partner's reassurance. Now, this can be difficult because everyone processes doing BDSM in different ways. So some people who are bottoms, they need alone time afterwards. They need to kind of chill on their own. And if that's what your partner is like, totally valid. However, I would try to think of ways you can both get your needs met, right? Like maybe they can't talk to you, but they can send a text, or they can pre-write out a note beforehand that says, hey, just a little reminder, totally love doing BDSM with you. Like just something cheeky and funny like that to help get you through that especially immediate post-scene feeling of like, oh my God, I totally did something awful. What am I? Who am I? This is not, like that panic. Try to come up with ways to help proactively deal with that panic. And enlisting your partner again can be very helpful. And I think this is why negotiations are so key. Do not skip over negotiations, even as you get more experienced. If you know you deal with a lot of guilt and shame, make sure those negotiations involve a lot of questions, a lot of really detailed conversation about what the other person likes, why they're into what they're into, and really, really hold on to that when you're doing the scene, when you're feeling that guilt of like, I know this person wants this. I know it's consensual. I know they can stop this at any time with a single word, and I would do it. And just really affirm yourself in that. However, guilt and shame can be very complicated issues. They can be tied up in a lot of stuff with our childhood or trauma, and if that is what's happening with you, I would really recommend seeking out a mental health professional to help you deal with that. But when you are dealing with guilt, I think outside of dealing with it in a more case-by-case basis, something that is good to do is be more proactive. And when it comes to things like guilt and shame, do not do things that reinforce the guilt and shame. Do not be overly apologetic. Do not try to say sorry for things you don't actually have to say sorry for. Because when you have like body language is very like timid and is very guilty feeling, like, like even dogs do this when they feel guilty, right? Like, you've got the eyes and you've got their shoulders all hunched and you're trying to take up not very much space and you're all like, oh, please don't look at me. Like when you act physically and verbally like you should feel guilty, that is telling your brain this emotion is correct for this scenario. I am right to feel guilty right now. It might not actually be true that your feelings are meshing with the reality of the scenario. So just really make sure you're not kind of tripping yourself up where like, well, I am getting affirmation from my partner, but it's not working. You gotta also work on your own behavior, your own cognitive process as well. And I did just talk about when partners withdraw after a scene is done. Also, as the dom or top, don't necessarily withdraw right away as well. It can feel like, oh my God, I need to be alone. I'm an awful person. I need to hide myself from the world. And when you know you don't actually need to feel guilty, that emotion is not useful for you, fight that urge. If you can, be with your partner, be there with them, talk with them, have dinner together, watch a movie, cuddle, whatever it is you like, physically and emotionally connect with them so that way you can be reassured, I don't need to feel guilt. This person is not rejecting me, and so I don't need to reject myself. I think something else that can be useful is just to validate yourself and talk to yourself and say, what I did was in line with my values, this was okay, this was consensual, and then keep doing it. This might seem like weird or like maybe even obvious, but the more you do BDSM and then nothing bad happens, the more your brain's going to be like, oh, this is fine. This is actually okay. We're actually okay. And so you can kind of desensitize yourself to that guilt, to that shame, if you are doing BDSM in a positive way, doing it often, being around people that are also affirming your experience and affirming doing BDSM being a positive and okay thing. If you are always kind of just soaking in your guilt and are around people that are very kink negative, that is going to give you a very different mental experience than being around people that love BDSM and think it's positive and do it in a positive way and building positive community around BDSM. This is one of the reasons why building community as a dom or a top is so important. Not just because like some abstract idea of community is good, but being around people that affirm you and value you and think that you're a good person is a good thing. So for the final thing I want to talk about here, this is not so much an issue you're likely to run into when you are a newer dom or top, but as you gain more experience, you are more likely to run into this, which would be being stereotyped and being typecasted. And when you first get on your BDSM journey and you start doing more scenes, at first you can be like, wow, this is so amazing. At first I was like completely ignored, and now people actually want to play with me. I'm getting approached. This is great. And if you build that reputation on being the rope guy, being the wax play lady, being the knife lady, suddenly everyone starts coming to you for the wax play and the knife play and the yada yada. And at first you can be like, wow, this is awesome. But then eventually it starts kind of wearing on you and you go, well, I don't know if I only ever want to do this one thing. Can I maybe do something else, please? And it's very easy to get a reputation in the scene as being the blank kind of a person. And dealing with that is multifaceted because I also mentioned stereotyping, right? And I think layered on top of being typecasted, you also have to deal with stereotypes, which is, oh yeah, he's a big burly guy. I bet he's super into like rough body play and is like a really hard sadist. Or if you're a female dominant, I mean, good luck to you, honestly, because people go, oh my gosh, she's so cold, she's so mean, she's too assertive, she's too this, she's too that. And that's assuming that the male doms in the room take you seriously as actually being a dominant and not just a switch or a submissive who hasn't figured it out yet. And that is a lot to have to work through, especially if what you want to do is totally counter to that. Like, I know a lot of like 6'5", 250-pound male doms that are like, I just really like erotic massage, or I just really like sensual spanking. I don't want to hurt anybody, and like the stereotype runs totally counter to what they're actually into. And so I think what you need to remember as a dom and a top when you're dealing with this is you are allowed to advocate for what you want to do. If you have been in a period of famine where you feel like you need to say yes to anything that comes along, because if you don't, it's going to be 3 parties before you get to play again, it can feel like, oh, I if I don't say yes, like, I'm not going to play. I'm not going to get to do anything. And so it's better for me to say yes to this than not have anything at all. And I think it's important to take a step back and really think about, do you actually want to do this, or would you prefer to do something else? Because negotiations are not just asking the sub, are you okay if I do this to you? It's you saying, hey, well, you know, I know you approached me for doing bondage, but I've actually been really curious about trying a flogging. I have this flogger in my bag I never get to use. Would you want to try that with me? And sometimes a partner is going to be like, well, you know, I approached you because I saw you do this thing, and so I only really want to start with this thing I saw you do first. But if that goes well, sure, yeah, in the future we can try this, that, the other. So there can also be a practical reason for why people don't necessarily want to, right off the bat, do new play with a stranger. But if you are building a relationship, if you want to have play partners you play with multiple times, gaining that comfort in the familiar thing first and then going into newer areas with that person can be a really wonderful thing. And who knows, right? You could say during a negotiation, I want to try a flogging, and then the bottom go, oh, I love flogging. I haven't gotten to do it in 6 months. Do you want to try it with me? And so just keep in mind, if you don't ask for it, you're never going to get it. And so remember to advocate for yourself. Don't, you know, run over anyone. Don't go, well, I know I said that I would do bondage with you, but actually today I decided I wanted to do flogging, and then like do a flogging when you planned something else. Don't be that guy. Stick to what you negotiated to, but you can still advocate and say, this is what I like, this is what I normally do, would you like to try this? And they can take it or leave it. It's really up to them. And so I think that's really all the advice that I have to share for right now for newer doms and tops. I hope this helped you in some way. I hope you got something out of this. I would love to know any advice you all have to share in a comment down below, because I am an outsider, right? I do top occasionally, but most of my information about what it's like to be a dom or a top comes from you guys and from the people I'm in relationships with where we've had that kind of dynamic. And so I am sure there are other common issues that people would like to see covered. So if you have anything else you want to add here, how you've worked through things, other issues I didn't talk about in this, please let me know, especially if you have any things that you would want me to talk about in future videos. Let me know in a comment, because like I said at the beginning, in 2023, I want to focus on more dom and top oriented content because there is just not a lot of it out there. So all that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. I don't normally say that, but we're doing it this time. Why not? And so yeah, if you like this, if you're not already, please do subscribe, because I make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related content. And finally, if you want to support what I do, the best way you can do that is with Patreon. A link to that will be down below. I do all kinds of things over there. I have exclusive videos, I have a Discord chat, I have just like lots of stuff, lots of resources, lots of writings, lots of things you guys don't see here on my YouTube channel. If you do already support over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.